am Stephanie, 29 years old, and I never thought my marriage would unravel at a family celebration. After 3 years with Derek, I still felt like an outsider around his wealthy relatives. That Sunday at his parents' mansion, I was wearing my best dress when his cousin Brooke suddenly pushed me into the pool from behind. "This is for acting better than us," she sneered. The worst part, Derek laughed and filmed the whole thing instead of helping me. If you are watching this story, please let me know where you are viewing from in the comments. Do not forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of disrespect. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Cincinnati, where my father worked as a high school math teacher and my mother as a nurse. We lived comfortably but frugally in a 3-bedroom house with a small yard. My parents emphasized education above all else, believing it was the key to a better life. Their sacrifices paid off when I became the first person in my family to attend college, earning a scholarship to study literature at a prestigious university. That was where I met Derek Harrington during my junior year. He came from old money. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast. Our worlds could not have been more different. While I worked part-time jobs to supplement my scholarship, Derek drove a brand new BMW his parents had gifted him for his 21st birthday. Despite our different backgrounds, we connected instantly over our shared love of classic literature and independent films. Our romance progressed quickly. Derek was charming, confident, and seemed genuinely interested in my perspectives on everything from poetry to politics. Within 8 months, he proposed with a diamond ring that cost more than my parents' annual income combined. I was swept away by the fairy tale of it all, the handsome, wealthy man who saw something special in me despite my ordinary background. The first meeting with his family should have been my warning sign. We gathered at their estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling property with 6 bedrooms, a tennis court, and a view of the Atlantic Ocean that took my breath away. His mother, Elaine, greeted me with air kisses and a once-over that made me instantly aware of my department store dress. His father, Harold, barely looked up from his newspaper to acknowledge me. "So, Stephanie studies literature," Derek announced proudly to his assembled family during dinner. "How?" quaint his mother replied with a tight smile. "And what exactly does one do with such a degree? Teach high school like your father?" The way she said high school teacher made it sound like my father cleaned toilets for a living. I swallowed my pride and explained my plans to pursue a doctorate and become a professor. "Universities are becoming so accessible these days," commented Derek's Aunt Victoria, exchanging knowing glances with Elaine. When I mentioned these comments to Derek later that night, he waved them away. "They are just joking around. Do not be so sensitive." This would become a familiar refrain throughout our relationship. I married Derek, believing that with time his family would warm to me. I was wrong. The subtle digs continued, always carefully worded to maintain plausible deniability. Comments about my simple upbringing. Questions about whether certain foods were too exotic for my palate. Surprised that I knew which fork to use for salad. Among all his relatives, his cousin Brooke was the worst. Only 2 years older than Derek, she had grown up alongside him with all the same privileges, but none of his ambition. While Derek had at least completed his business degree, Brooke had dropped out of 3 colleges before settling into a life of leisure funded by her trust fund. She seemed to resent my academic achievements, and the fact that Derek appeared proud of them. "Not everyone needs to hide behind books to feel important," she once told me at a Christmas gathering, champagne glass dangling from her manicured fingers. "Some of us actually know how to enjoy life." By the time I completed my doctorate and secured a position as an assistant professor of American literature, the dynamic was firmly established. Every accomplishment of mine was met with passive-aggressive comments from his family and reassurances from Derek that I was misinterpreting their intentions. When the invitation arrived for his parents' 30th anniversary celebration, I suggested that perhaps Derek should attend alone. We had been married for 3 years by then, and I had endured countless uncomfortable family gatherings. That would be incredibly disrespectful. Derek insisted, his tone indicating the matter was not up for discussion. "They are my family, Stephanie. You need to make more of an effort." I relented, as I always did when it came to his family. I spent too much money on a new dress, navy blue silk that fell just below my knees, elegant but not flashy. I had my hair styled professionally. I even practiced small talk topics in the mirror, determined to make it through the weekend without incident. "It will be fine," I told myself as we packed our overnight bags. "Just smile, be gracious, and avoid Brooke." Little did I know that this particular family gathering would be the breaking point of our marriage setting in motion, a chain of events that would ultimately lead me to discover my own strength. Derek's parents' anniversary celebration was held at their primary residence, a colonial-style mansion situated on 5 acres of perfectly landscaped grounds about an hour outside of Boston. As we drove through the wrought iron gates and up the circular driveway, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The house loomed ahead, all white columns and gleaming windows with luxury cars parked in neat rows. "Remember to mention how much you love the new landscaping," Derek instructed, as we approached. "Mom redid the entire east garden this spring, and she's very proud of it." I nodded mentally, adding it to my list of strategic compliments designed to win even the smallest crumb of approval from his family. We were greeted at the door by a uniformed server, offering champagne on a silver tray. Inside the house had been transformed with elaborate floral arrangements and twinkling lights. At least 50 guests milled about, most of them unfamiliar to me despite years of marriage into the family. Elaine spotted us immediately, waving us over with a practiced hostess smile. She was impeccably dressed in a designer gown that probably cost more than my monthly salary, her blonde hair arranged in an elegant updo. "Derek, darling," she exclaimed, embracing her son before turning to me with considerably less enthusiasm. "And Stephanie, that dress is interesting, so simple." "Thank you for inviting us," I replied, ignoring the backhanded compliment. "The house looks absolutely beautiful. Derek mentioned you redesigned the East Garden. I would love to see it." Her eyebrows raised slightly in surprise at my knowledge of her pet project. "Perhaps later. Do circulate, both of you. The Montgomerys just flew in from Paris and are dying to catch up with you, Derek." As Elaine pulled Derek away, I found myself alone on the periphery of the party, a familiar position at family gatherings. I made my way to the bar and requested a glass of white wine, planning to nurse it slowly throughout the evening to maintain my composure. From across the room I spotted Brooke entering with her latest boyfriend, a tanned man with 2 white teeth who was reportedly a yacht broker in Miami. She looked spectacular in a red dress that hugged her slim figure, her dark hair falling in loose waves down her back. Her eyes scanned the room and narrowed when they landed on me. She whispered something to her boyfriend, who glanced my way and smirked. I turned away, pretending to be fascinated by a large abstract painting on the wall. Throughout the next hour, I made polite conversation with various relatives and friends of the family, careful to mention my position as a teacher rather than a professor, after learning early in our marriage that the latter was often met with sneers about academics and their detachment from the real world. During dinner, I was seated between Derek's elderly Uncle Frank and a cousin's wife, whose name I could not recall. Uncle Frank turned out to be unexpectedly pleasant company. A retired literature professor himself, he engaged me in a genuine conversation about contemporary American novelists. "You know your stuff," he commented approvingly, after we debated the merits of different narrative techniques. "Refreshing to talk to someone who actually reads these days." I noticed Brooke watching our conversation from across the table, her expression souring, as she observed Uncle Frank's apparent approval of me. She leaned over to whisper to Derek's sister Katie, both of them glancing my way with undisguised contempt. After dinner, guests moved to the back terrace and pool area for dessert and drinks. The Olympic-sized swimming pool was illuminated with underwater lights casting an ethereal blue glow across the stone patio. Servers circulated, with trays of petit fours and cordials. I was standing near the edge of the pool, admiring the night sky and enjoying a brief moment of solitude when I heard footsteps approaching from behind. Before I could turn around, I felt two hands plant firmly against my back and push with surprising force. I flew forward, arms flailing, and plunged into the cold water with a tremendous splash. The shock of it, the sudden wetness, the weight of my waterlogged dress, the chlorine stinging my eyes, left me momentarily disoriented. As I surfaced gasping for air, I heard laughter rippling through the crowd. Blinking water from my eyes, I saw Brooke standing at the edge of the pool, a triumphant smile on her face. "This is for acting better than us," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Little Miss Professor needed cooling off. I treaded water, my silk dress billowing around me like a jellyfish, my carefully styled hair plastered to my head. The worst moment came when I spotted Derek. Instead of rushing to help me, he was holding up his phone recording the entire humiliating scene. He was laughing alongside his cousin. No one moved to help me. Harold looked embarrassed, not for his niece's behavior, but for the disruption to his perfect party. Elaine pressed her lips together in disapproval, whether at Brooke or at me, for causing a scene I could not tell. The other guests watched with expressions ranging from shock to amusement to second-hand embarrassment. I swam to the side of the pool and pulled myself out, water streaming from my ruined dress and squelching in my expensive heels. My makeup was surely streaking down my face. The thin silk of my dress clung to my body in a way that made me feel naked in front of these people who had never accepted me. "It was just a joke," Brooke said defensively when she noticed no one was laughing anymore. "Lighten up." A server finally approached with a towel, which I accepted with as much dignity as I could muster. Derek lowered his phone and came over, still chuckling. "You should see your face," he said, showing me the video he had just captured of my humiliation. Classic. In that moment, something crystallized inside me. The person who was supposed to love and protect me had just documented my humiliation for his own amusement. I said nothing, simply wrapped the towel around my shoulders and asked for the car keys. "We cannot leave yet," Derek protested. "They have not even cut the anniversary cake." "I need to change," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage and hurt building inside me. "Unless you expect me to stand here soaking wet for the rest of the night." He reluctantly handed over the keys, and I made my way through the crowd of staring guests, leaving a trail of pool water on the immaculate marble floors. The drive back to Derek's parents' house was silent and tense. My dress was still damp despite my attempts to dry off, and I shivered in the passenger seat as the air conditioning chilled my wet skin. Derek drove with one hand on the wheel, the other scrolling through his phone, occasionally chuckling at the video he had taken. "You should see this from my angle," he said, breaking the silence. "Your expression when you hit the water was priceless." I stared out the window, watching the manicured estates of his parents' neighborhood blur past. "You think this is funny?" I finally asked. "Come on, Stephanie. It was just a joke. You are being too sensitive as usual." "Your cousin pushed me into a pool in front of everyone. I was fully clothed. She deliberately humiliated me, and instead of helping me, you filmed it." Derek sighed with exaggerated patience. "Brooke was just having fun. You always take everything so personally. This is why my family thinks you are difficult." The injustice of his statement struck me like a physical blow. Difficult? I have spent 3 years trying to fit in with your family despite their constant judgment and backhanded comments. I have smiled through every insult, every dismissive remark about my background, my career, everything I care about. See, this is exactly what I mean. You always think everyone is attacking you. Maybe if you made more of an effort to join in, instead of acting superior all the time. Acting superior? I nearly shouted. When have I ever acted superior? By having a conversation about books with your uncle. By daring to have a career I care about. You know how you get with all your literary references and big ideas. Not everyone cares about that stuff. Sometimes you make people feel stupid, and they do not appreciate it. His casual dismissal of my entire personality, the things that made me who I was, left me speechless. We arrived back at the house in tense silence. I went straight to our guest room and peeled off my ruined dress. The expensive silk was likely beyond saving the blue dye running in streaks. Another financial loss to add to the evening's emotional toll. I showered, washing away the chlorine and the lingering sense of public shame. When I emerged, wrapped in a bathrobe, Derek was waiting in the bedroom. "You are not seriously planning to skip the rest of the party," he said, his tone making it clear this was not a question, but an accusation. "I am not going back there tonight. My parents will see it as a snub. I told them you were just changing." "I was pushed into a pool, Derek. My dress is ruined. I am humiliated and exhausted." "You are being dramatic. It was a harmless prank." I looked at my husband, this man I had married whose family had made me feel inadequate for years, who now stood before me demanding I return to face my tormentors with a smile, and felt something shift inside me. "Go back to the party," I said quietly. "I am going to sleep in the guest room tonight." Derek returned to his parents' anniversary celebration, while I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, replaying the events of the evening and countless other slights over the years. When had I started accepting this treatment as normal? When had I begun to believe that I deserved it? We drove home in silence the next morning. As Derek navigated the Sunday traffic, I scrolled through my phone and discovered he had already shared the pool video with several of his friends. The text thread included comments like, "Dude, your wife was pissed," and "Brooke is savage," along with laughing emojis. My husband had not only failed to defend me, he had actively participated in extending my humiliation beyond the family gathering. "You shared the video?" I asked, my voice hollow. Derek glanced over, surprised by the question. "Just with a few friends." "It is funny, Stephanie. You would see that if you could get some perspective." "Delete it," I said firmly. "What?" "Delete the video. Now." "You are overreacting again. It is a video of me being assaulted and humiliated. Delete it, or I am getting out of this car right now and taking an Uber home." Muttering about my inability to take a joke, Derek reluctantly deleted the video from his phone. I knew copies probably existed elsewhere by now, but I needed to take this small stand. At home, I retreated to my office while Derek watched football in the living room, acting as if nothing significant had happened. That evening, I checked his phone while he was in the shower and discovered a text exchange with Brooke. "Brooke. Sorry if I caused drama with the Professor, Derek. No worries, she will get over it. Brooke. She always acts like she is too good for us, Derek, I know. Sometimes she needs to be taken down a peg. Brooke, mission accomplished. LOL." I set the phone down, my hands trembling. The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined possible. My own husband thought I needed to be taken down a peg. He had aligned himself with his family against me. His wife, the person he had vowed to cherish and protect. Over the next week, tension hung in our house like a toxic cloud. Derek alternated between ignoring the incident entirely and making dismissive comments about my grudge holding. When I tried to explain how hurt I felt by his actions, he turned the conversation around, suggesting that my inability to laugh at myself was the real problem. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself reviewing our relationship with new clarity. There had been warning signs from the beginning. The way Derek always sided with his family, his dismissal of my feelings, his subtle undermining of my accomplishments. I had been so enamored with him, so eager to believe in our love story, that I had ignored these red flags. I thought about the women Derek had dated before me. He rarely spoke of them, but I recalled mentions of an ex-girlfriend named Allison, who had apparently been too emotional and could not get along with his family. I wondered now if Allison had simply refused to tolerate the treatment I had accepted for years. As days passed with the issue unresolved, I made a decision. I would no longer be the accommodating wife who swallowed her pride to keep the peace. It was time to take control of my narrative and stand up for myself in a way that could not be dismissed or minimized. If Derek and his family wanted to play games, they were about to discover I was no longer willing to be their pawn. The following Saturday, while Derek was playing golf with clients, I invited my closest friends, Sarah, Lauren, and Emily, to our house for an emergency support session. I had kept most of Derek's family's behavior to myself over the years, embarrassed to admit how I was being treated, and determined to make the marriage work. Now, I laid it all bare. "He filmed you being pushed into a pool," Sarah repeated incredulously after I recounted the incident, "and then shared it with his friends." I nodded, pouring more wine into our glasses. The four of us were gathered in my living room, the same space where I had hosted countless dinner parties for Derek's colleagues and friends, always the perfect hostess, despite feeling like an imposter in my own home. "And this is not the first time his family has been awful to you?" Emily asked, her expression a mixture of shock and anger on my behalf. "Not even close," I admitted. "It has been a pattern since day one. The comments about my background, the dismissal of my career, the inside jokes I am never part of. I have been trying to win their approval for years." "And Derek never stands up for you," Lauren pressed. "Never. He either does not notice or tells me I am being too sensitive. Lately, I have started to think he actually agrees with them." The three women exchanged glances. We had been friends since college, long before I met Derek. They had witnessed my whirlwind romance and expressed concerns about the speed of our relationship, which I had dismissed as normal caution. "Stephanie," Sarah said gently, "this is not normal. This is not how families treat each other. This is not how husbands treat their wives." Deep down, I had known this truth for some time, but hearing it stated so plainly brought tears to my eyes. "The question is," Emily said, refilling my wine glass, "what are you going to do about it?" "I do not know," I admitted. "I have tried talking to him. He does not listen. He turns everything around, so somehow, I end up apologizing." "Classic gaslighting," Lauren observed. She worked as a psychologist and had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout my story. "He makes you doubt your own perceptions, so you cannot hold him accountable." The conversation shifted to options: marriage counseling, separation, divorce. Each possibility carried its own complications and consequences. As we talked, a different kind of plan began to form in my mind. What if I said slowly, instead of just leaving, "I make sure Derek and his family understand exactly what they have been doing"? What if I show them themselves in a way they cannot dismiss? My friends looked intrigued, but concerned. "I am not talking about revenge," I clarified. "I am talking about truth, about creating a moment of clarity that forces them to see their behavior for what it is." Over the next few hours, a plan took shape. It would require research, preparation, and courage, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of purpose replacing my hurt and confusion. After my friends left, I began researching Derek's past relationships more thoroughly. His social media accounts offered limited information, but through mutual connections and some strategic searching, I discovered more about his ex-girlfriend Allison. They had dated for nearly 2 years before our relationship, and from what I could piece together, the breakup had been messy. What struck me were the similarities in their photos together compared to ours. The same possessive arm around the shoulder, the same family gatherings where Allison stood slightly apart from the group, the same forced smile I had perfected over the years. In the final months of their relationship, I noticed she appeared increasingly withdrawn in photos, much as I had felt lately. After much deliberation, I sent her a message explaining who I was and asking if she would be willing to talk. To my surprise, she responded within hours, suggesting we meet for coffee the following day. Allison Turner was not what I expected. Based on Derek's few dismissive comments about her, I had imagined someone emotional and unstable. Instead, I met a composed, articulate woman who had built a successful career in marketing since their breakup 4 years ago. "I wondered if he would do the same thing to his wife," she said after I explained the pool incident and the pattern of behavior. "He almost had me convinced I was crazy for thinking his family was terrible to me." "The gaslighting," I murmured. She nodded. "Exactly. Derek is charming and can be incredibly loving, but he is deeply enmeshed with his family's values. Anyone who challenges those values becomes the enemy." "Did something specific end your relationship?" I asked. Allison stirred her coffee thoughtfully. There was a similar incident at a family ski trip. His brother played a prank that left me stranded on an advanced slope when I was a beginner. I could have been seriously hurt. Derek laughed it off, said I should have been more careful. That was my breaking point. She described the aftermath. Derek's attempts to minimize what happened. His family closing ranks, the subtle campaign to paint her as emotionally unstable to their social circle. I lost friends in the breakup, she admitted. People who believed I was the problem. It took me months of therapy to trust my own perceptions again. As our conversation continued, an idea formed. Allison the First said carefully, I am planning something, a gathering where I intend to address Derek's behavior and that of his family. Would you consider attending? She hesitated, understandably reluctant to revisit a painful chapter of her life. But after I outlined my plan, not for revenge but for truth and accountability, she slowly nodded. If it helps prevent someone else from going through what we did, she said, I am in. Over the next few days, I meticulously prepared. I created a digital presentation, compiling evidence of the pattern of behavior, texts, emails, social media posts, even audio recordings of some particularly dismissive comments Derek had made. I organized them chronologically, showing the escalation over time. I planned a dinner party for the following Saturday, carefully selecting the guest list, some of Derek's friends who had always been kind to me, a few key members of his family, including Brooke, my own close friends for support, and of course Allison. I told Derek it was to clear the air after the pool incident, which he seemed to accept with relief, assuming I was finally moving past it. The menu was planned to perfection. All of Derek's favorites, creating an atmosphere of reconciliation that would make what followed even more impactful. I arranged the dining room for optimal visibility of the presentation I had prepared. The night before the gathering, I barely slept, my mind racing with doubt and determination in equal measure. Was I doing the right thing? Would this make any difference? Was I prepared for the potential fallout? By morning I had my answer. For too long I had silenced myself to keep the peace. It was time to speak my truth, whatever the consequences might be. The evening of my carefully orchestrated gathering arrived with perfect early autumn weather. Cool enough for the fireplace to be lit, but warm enough for drinks on the patio beforehand. I had spent the day preparing our home, arranging flowers, polishing glasses, and setting up the discreet projector in the dining room that would be essential for later. Derek seemed pleased by my efforts, interpreting them as a sign that I was finally getting over the pool incident. He moved about the house in high spirits, selecting wine from our cellar, and putting on the playlist he favored for entertaining. This is why I married you, he commented, as I arranged a charcuterie board. No one hosts like you do. I smiled tightly, thinking how that compliment revealed so much about how he valued me, for what I could do for him, for how I could make him look good to others rather than for who I was. Guests began arriving at 7. First came my support system, Sarah, Lauren, and Emily, who hugged me a little longer than usual, silently communicating their solidarity. Next were a few of Derek's friends from work, including Tom and his wife Diane, who had always treated me with genuine warmth, despite being primarily Derek's friends. Derek's sister Katie arrived with her husband, followed by his parents Elaine and Harold. I greeted them with practiced politeness, noting Elaine's surprise at being included after the pool incident. Brooke arrived fashionably late without her boyfriend, but with her signature confidence air, kissing me, as if she had not humiliated me just weeks earlier. Lovely spread, Stephanie, she commented, helping herself to wine. Though the cheese knife should really be angled toward the handle, not the blade. Even now she could not resist a criticism. Derek moved through the gathering with easy charm, ensuring everyone had drinks, making introductions where necessary, playing the perfect host. I noticed how differently he behaved when entertaining. More attentive, more generous, with compliments, more aware of others' needs. It was a performance I had once found endearing, but now recognized as calculated. The doorbell rang again, as we were about to move from the patio to the dining room. Derek, in the middle of a story about a recent business trip, waved for me to answer it. I opened the door to Allison, who stood nervously on our porch, in a simple black dress, her blonde hair pulled back in an elegant knot. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly, ushering her in. From across the room, I saw the exact moment Derek noticed her. His face froze mid-laugh, the color draining visibly. He excused himself from his conversation and strode over, his casual demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. "What is she doing here?" he hissed under his breath. "I invited her," I replied calmly. "She has some relevant perspective for tonight's discussion." Before he could protest further, I announced dinner was ready and guided everyone to the dining room. The table was set beautifully, place cards positioning each guest strategically. Derek found himself between his mother and Brooke, while Allison was seated beside my friend Sarah directly across from him. The first course proceeded with forced normalcy, though I noticed Derek drinking more quickly than usual, his eyes darting between Allison and me. His family too seemed unsettled by her presence, though none addressed it directly. As the main course was being served, I stood and gently tapped my glass with a spoon. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me expectantly. "Thank you all for coming tonight." I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Some of you might be wondering why I organized this dinner, especially after what happened at Harold and Elaine's anniversary celebration." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Brooke studied her plate intently. "I wanted to bring together the people who have been significant parts of our lives, Derek's and mine, because I believe in the power of truth and accountability in relationships." Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Stephanie, perhaps this is not the time." "Actually, Derek, this is exactly the time," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "For 3 years I have tried to fit into your family. I have smiled through insults disguised as jokes. I have watched you laugh along when your relatives belittled me. I have doubted my own perceptions when you told me I was being too sensitive." The room had gone completely still. Even the sounds of cutlery had ceased. "2 weeks ago, Brooke pushed me into a pool at your parents' anniversary party. Instead of helping me, you filmed it, and later shared that video with friends." I turned to face his cousin directly. "You said it was for acting better than us. I want to understand, what about my behavior made you feel justified in humiliating me?" Brooke flushed, looking to Derek for support. "It was just a joke," she mumbled. "Everyone was having fun." Was I having fun? Brooke, did I look like I was enjoying being pushed into water fully clothed in front of 50 people? Before she could respond, I pressed a button on the remote hidden in my hand. The lights dimmed slightly as the projector came to life, displaying the first slide of my presentation on the wall behind me, a compilation of photos from family gatherings over the years, showing my increasingly isolated position in group settings. "This is not about one incident," I continued. "This is about a pattern." For the next 15 minutes, I methodically presented evidence of the systematic undermining I had experienced, screenshots of text exchanges, video clips from family gatherings, where dismissive comments were clearly audible, social media posts with thinly veiled insults in the comments. Derek's face darkened with each new piece of evidence. "You have been collecting this, recording conversations. This is insane, Stephanie. Is it insane to document being repeatedly mistreated? Or is it insane to gaslight someone into thinking their experiences are not real?" I nodded to Allison, who straightened in her chair. "Many of you know I dated Derek before Stephanie." She began, her voice slightly trembling but determined. "What you may not know is that I experienced the exact same pattern of behavior from both Derek and his family. The same jokes, at my expense. The same dismissal, when I expressed hurt. The same isolation tactics." Derek pushed back from the table. "This is ridiculous. You are ganging up on me based on ancient history." "It is not ancient history when it is still happening," I countered. "Allison is here because your behavior follows a pattern that extends beyond our marriage. You select partners you can control who will enhance your image, but not challenge your family's values. When they inevitably object to mistreatment, you label them as too sensitive or emotional." Elaine cleared her throat. I think you are being extremely unfair to our family, Stephanie. We have always welcomed you. Have you, Elaine? I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. Let us look at some of your welcoming comments. The next slide displayed a series of quotes from my mother-in-law, each with the date and context. Comments about my humble origins, questions about whether I knew how to use certain cutlery, suggestions that my academic achievements were due to lowered standards. Harold stood abruptly. This is inappropriate. We did not come here to be ambushed. You came here expecting me to continue playing the role I have played for years, the grateful outsider so honored to be included that I would accept any treatment. That role is no longer available. The room erupted in overlapping conversations, Derek attempting to discredit Allison, Brooke loudly proclaiming she had never meant any harm, my friends interjecting with their observations of how I had changed since marrying into the family. Throughout the chaos, I remained standing calm at the center of the storm I had created. Finally, Derek slammed his hand on the table. Enough, he shouted. Stephanie, you have made your point. You feel mistreated. Fine. We can discuss this privately, but this public humiliation is completely uncalled for. Public humiliation. I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Like being pushed into a pool in front of 50 people. Like having my husband film it instead of helping me. Like having that video shared with friends. The parallel was not lost on the other guests. Even Derek's friends looked uncomfortable now. You set this whole thing up to embarrass me in front of my family and friends. Derek accused, his charm completely evaporated. This just proves how vindictive you can be. No, Derek. I set this up because private conversations have failed. Because every time I have tried to address these issues with you alone, you have dismissed them. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses. In that moment, looking at my husband's angry face, I recognized that the man I had fallen in love with existed primarily in my imagination. The real Derek was this person. Someone who valued appearance over substance, family loyalty over basic respect, and control over partnership. I think I said quietly that it would be best if you stayed somewhere else tonight. The shock on his face was almost comical. In 3 years of marriage, I had never directly opposed him in this way. You cannot be serious. This is my house too. Yes, it is. But tonight I need space. Tomorrow we can discuss where we go from here, but right now I am asking you to leave. For a tense moment I thought he might refuse. Then Tom, his closest friend, stood up. Come on, man. You can crash at our place tonight. Give everyone some time to cool off. The dinner party dissolved into awkward goodbyes and hushed conversations. Derek left with Tom and Diane shooting me a look of pure betrayal as he walked out the door. His family followed shortly after, Elaine tight-lipped with anger, Harold avoiding my eyes entirely. Brooke surprisingly lingered. For what it is worth, she said quietly as she collected her purse. I never realized how it all looked when put together like that. I am not saying I agree with everything you said, but I am sorry about the pool. It was not much of an apology, but it was the first genuine interaction we had ever had. I nodded in acknowledgement as she left. When only my friends and Allison remained, the tension that had been holding me upright finally released. I sank onto the sofa, emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter than I had felt in years. You did it, Sarah said, sitting beside me. You actually stood up to all of them. That was the most badass thing I have ever seen, Emily added, pouring fresh glasses of wine for everyone. Allison smiled tentatively. Does it feel like freedom yet? I considered the question carefully. Not freedom exactly, but perhaps the start of it. As my friends helped clean up the remnants of the confrontational dinner party, I knew that while the hardest conversation was over, the real work of reclaiming my life was just beginning. The house felt eerily quiet the morning after the dinner party. I awoke alone in our king-sized bed, momentarily disoriented, before remembering the events of the previous evening. My phone displayed multiple missed calls and text messages from Derek, ranging from angry accusations to wounded pleas for reconciliation. I set it aside without responding, needing time to process my next steps. Sarah had stayed overnight in our guest room, unwilling to leave me alone in the aftermath. She found me in the kitchen staring blankly at the coffee maker. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. "Like I just jumped out of an airplane," I replied, terrified but also alive. We were midway through breakfast when the doorbell rang. Derek stood on the porch unshaven and wearing the same clothes from the night before. His eyes were bloodshot either from lack of sleep or too much alcohol, possibly both. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the foyer. He stopped short when he saw Sarah at the kitchen island. Privately. Sarah raised her eyebrows at me in silent question. I nodded reassuringly. "It is okay. I will call you later." After she left, Derek and I faced each other across the living room. The space felt different somehow, as if the truth spoken the night before had physically altered our home. "What you did last night was completely out of line," he began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You ambushed me and my family. You invited my ex-girlfriend to our home. You recorded private conversations. Do you have any idea how inappropriate that was?" "I understand why you see it that way," I replied calmly. "But from where I stand, it was the only way to make you truly see the pattern of behavior that has been hurting me for years. By humiliating me in front of everyone we know, how is that different from what you accused Brooke of doing?" "The difference is intent, Derek. I was not trying to humiliate you. I was trying to show you a truth you have refused to see. And I noticed that you are not actually denying anything I presented." He ran his hands through his disheveled hair. "Look, I get it. Brooke went too far with the pool thing. My family can be a bit snobbish sometimes. But that is just how they are. You knew what you were marrying into." "Did I?" "Because I thought I was marrying someone who would stand by me, not join in when his family mistreated me." Derek's expression softened, shifting into the charming, contrite look I had seen so many times before. "Stephanie, I love you. We can work through this. Maybe we could try couples counseling. I will talk to my family about being more considerate." A week earlier, this approach might have swayed me. The promise of change, the validation of my feelings, it would have been enough to pull me back into the cycle. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. "I think you should stay with Tom for a while longer," I said. "I need time to think about what I want." His face hardened again. "This is my house too. You cannot just kick me out." "I am not kicking you out permanently. I am asking for space to process what has happened and decide what comes next for me." After more argument, Derek finally agreed to give me a week, though his parting words, "You will realize how good you had it once you calm down," suggested he viewed my stance as a temporary emotional reaction rather than a fundamental reassessment of our relationship. Over the next few days, I experienced a range of emotions I had suppressed for years: anger at how I had been treated, grief for the marriage I had thought I had, fear about an uncertain future. But underneath it all was a growing sense of clarity and purpose. I consulted with a divorce attorney to understand my options. During our marriage, I had continued building my career, while Derek had made significantly more in his executive position. Our finances were intertwined in complex ways. The attorney advised me to gather all financial records before making any decisions. What I discovered shocked me. Despite our comfortable lifestyle, Derek had accumulated substantial debt through risky investments he had never discussed with me. Several credit cards I knew nothing about carried balances in the tens of thousands. Most disturbingly, he had been siphoning money from our joint savings account into a private account under only his name. The financial deception was the final confirmation I needed. This was not merely about his family's treatment of me, or his failure to stand up for me. This was about a fundamental lack of respect and partnership at the core of our marriage. When Derek returned at the end of the week expecting reconciliation, I presented him with divorce papers instead. "You cannot be serious," he said, staring at the documents in disbelief, "over one incident at a pool." "This is not about the pool, Derek. This is about 3 years of disrespect, gaslighting, and lies. including financial lies. I slid the printouts of his secret accounts across the table. When were you planning to tell me about these? His face paled. You had no right to go through my private financial information. As your wife, I had every right. We are legally and financially bound together. Your debt is my debt. Your deception affects my future. The conversation that followed was ugly. Derek cycled through anger, manipulation, and even tears in his attempts to maintain control of the situation. When he realized I would not be swayed, he shifted tactics, threatening to make the divorce as difficult and expensive as possible. My family has connections you cannot imagine, he warned. Judges, lawyers, do you really think you will come out ahead in this fight? His threat only strengthened my resolve. If that is how you want to handle this, so be it. But remember, I have evidence of your behavior and your financial deception. Do you really want that made public? In the days that followed, word of our impending divorce spread through Derek's family and our social circle. The reactions were predictably divided. His family closed ranks around him, with Elaine calling me directly to suggest I was making a terrible mistake over a simple misunderstanding. Some of our mutual friends, uncomfortable with the messy reality beneath our seemingly perfect marriage, drifted toward Derek's version of events. But there were surprises too. Derek's younger sister Katie reached out to me privately, apologizing for her past behavior and acknowledging the truth in what I had presented at the dinner party. I always knew something was off in how they treated you, she admitted over coffee. But it was easier to go along with it than to challenge the family dynamic. I am sorry I did not stand up for you. Most unexpectedly, Brooke appeared at my office one afternoon asking to speak with me. She had been doing some thinking after the dinner party. I was jealous of you, she admitted bluntly. Your education, your career, the way you always seemed so put together. Pushing you into that pool was not a joke. It was mean, and I knew it when I did it. I am not good at apologies, but I am sorry. Her candor was refreshing after years of subtle barbs disguised as casual comments. I did not immediately forgive her, but I appreciated her honesty. Thank you for acknowledging that, I replied. It means something. The divorce proceedings began with Derek initially making good on his threat to contest everything. He hired an expensive attorney known for aggressive tactics, while I worked with a firm specializing in high-conflict divorces. The process was draining both emotionally and financially, but I remained committed to securing my freedom and a fair settlement. A turning point came when Derek's attorney reviewed the financial evidence my team had compiled, including the hidden accounts and unauthorized transfers. Recognizing the potential damage to Derek's professional reputation, if these details became public record, they suddenly became more amenable to negotiation. Throughout this challenging period, I found strength I never knew I possessed. I continued teaching my classes, even publishing an article in a prestigious literary journal. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage. I started therapy to understand how I had allowed myself to be diminished for so long. What you are experiencing is actually common, my therapist explained during one session. When we are in the middle of unhealthy relationships, we often cannot see them clearly. Your ability to recognize the patterns and take action shows tremendous courage and self-awareness. 6 months after the pool incident, as autumn turned to winter, I signed the final divorce papers. The settlement was fair. I kept our house, buying out Derek's share, received appropriate spousal support, and was not held liable for the debts he had hidden from me. More importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self. The woman who had climbed out of that pool humiliated and silent was not the same woman who now stood on her own, ready to begin a new chapter. 1 year after the infamous pool incident, I stood in the living room of my redecorated home, surveying the changes I had made. Gone were Derek's dark leather furnishings and hunting trophies, replaced with comfortable sofas in soft blues and greens, bookshelves filled with my beloved literature collection and artwork that spoke to my soul rather than my ex-husband's status concerns. The physical transformation of my space mirrored my internal journey. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier, with a settlement that allowed me to remain in our home after buying out Derek's share. The process had been challenging. Derek had initially contested everything from property division to spousal support, but my evidence of his financial deceptions had ultimately led to a fair resolution. My career at the university had flourished in the wake of my personal upheaval. Perhaps channeling my newfound voice, I had published 2 well-received articles in prestigious journals and had been promoted to associate professor with a promising track toward tenure. My students commented on my more engaged teaching style, unaware that my newfound confidence stemmed from reclaiming my personal power. "The house looks amazing," Sarah remarked, as she arrived for our monthly dinner gathering. My core friend group, Sarah, Lauren, and Emily, had been my lifeline throughout the divorce. They now gathered regularly in my reclaimed space, a tradition that helped heal the memory of that confrontational dinner party. "I still cannot believe how much brighter it feels without all those heavy drapes," Derek insisted on. I replied, arranging a cheese platter in the kitchen. "It is not just the house," Lauren observed, always the psychologist. "You look brighter too, more present." She was right. The constant anxiety that had been my companion throughout my marriage, the fear of saying the wrong thing, wearing the wrong outfit, somehow embarrassing Derek in front of his family, had lifted. I moved through the world with a confidence that felt both new and like returning to my true self. The most unexpected development in my post-divorce life had been the relationships that survived and even strengthened after the split. Katie, Derek's younger sister, had continued to reach out despite family pressure to cut ties with me. Over coffee dates and occasional lunch meetings, we had developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect rather than obligatory family connection. "I have been doing a lot of thinking about family patterns," she told me during one such meeting. "Watching how they treated you made me question how they have treated me all these years. The expectations, the subtle controlling behaviors, the way we never talk about anything real." Even more surprising was the cautious reconciliation with Derek's parents. 6 months after the divorce, Harold had reached out via email requesting a meeting. Curious but wary, I had agreed to meet him at a neutral coffee shop. "What I need to say is long overdue," he began awkwardly, looking older and less intimidating than in my memories. "The way our family treated you was wrong. Elaine and I have been doing some reflection. We were raised to believe certain things about status and appearance that we never questioned. Seeing it all laid out that night at your dinner party, it was uncomfortable but necessary." His apology, while imperfect, seemed genuine. Over time, Elaine too made tentative efforts to make amends, though her ingrained snobbery occasionally still surfaced in unconscious comments. I maintained clear boundaries with them both, but found value in the resolution their acknowledgement provided. Perhaps the most profound transformation came through my relationship with Brooke. After her unexpected office visit and apology, we had developed an unlikely connection. Her blunt nature, stripped of its former cruelty, proved refreshingly honest. She had begun therapy herself, working through her own issues with the family dynamics and her competitive tendencies. "I was such a bitch to you," she remarked candidly, during a surprising lunch date about 8 months after the incident. "And the thing is, I knew exactly what I was doing. I saw someone confident and accomplished, and instead of admiring that, I wanted to tear it down to make myself feel better." Her self-awareness was something I would never have expected from the woman who had pushed me into that pool. She eventually sent me a lengthy letter apologizing for her behavior throughout our acquaintance, which I kept as a reminder of how people can change when confronted with the truth of their actions. My story had unexpectedly gained a wider audience when I wrote a carefully anonymized account of my experience for an online magazine focusing on relationship psychology. The article, titled "Gaslighting and Family Systems: One Woman's Journey," went viral, generating thousands of comments from people who recognized similar patterns in their own relationships. This led to an invitation to speak at a conference on emotional abuse and recovery, where I met others who had navigated similar waters. I started a support group that met monthly, creating a safe space for sharing experiences and strategies for healing. My personal life had also taken a surprising turn. While not actively seeking a relationship, I had connected with a literature professor from a neighboring university at an academic conference. Michael was different from Derek in every way that mattered. Thoughtful, secure in himself, genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared intellectual passions. When he first came to my home for dinner, I found myself watching nervously for signs of the controlling behavior I had become so accustomed to with Derek. Instead, Michael asked questions about my book collection, complimented my cooking without surprise in his voice, and listened attentively when I spoke about my research. "You seem surprised when I ask your opinion," he observed perceptively during our third date. "Old habits," I admitted. I spent 3 years with someone who viewed my opinions as inconvenient contradictions to his own. Michael's response was simple but profound. "Well, I find your perspective fascinating, even when we disagree. Especially then, actually." A year to the day after being pushed into that pool, I hosted a reclamation celebration with my closest friends. We sat in my garden drinking wine and sharing stories of growth and change. The conversation turned to what I had learned from the experience. The most important thing, I reflected, was learning to trust my own perceptions again. For years I had been told that my feelings were wrong, my reactions excessive, my memories inaccurate. Reclaiming my truth was the first step toward reclaiming everything else. Emily raised her glass. "To Stephanie, who taught us all about standing in your power." As we toasted, I thought about the journey from that humiliated woman climbing out of a pool to the person I had become. The path had not been easy, but it had been necessary and ultimately transformative. The experience had taught me that standing up for yourself is not selfish or dramatic, it is essential. That family systems can be toxic regardless of their wealth or social standing. That true friends stand by you when you speak uncomfortable truths. Most importantly, that it is never too late to reclaim your voice and your worth. I still occasionally encounter Derek at professional events or through mutual acquaintances. He remarried quickly, to someone younger and seemingly more pliable, but rumors suggest the pattern is repeating itself. I wish them both well, but remain grateful for my escape. As for me, I continue to build a life that feels authentically mine. The pool incident, while painful, was ultimately the catalyst for profound growth and change. Sometimes, it takes being pushed into deep water to remember that you knew how to swim all along. If you are watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own relationships, please know that you deserve respect. You deserve to be heard. Your perceptions are valid. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was trying to diminish you? How did you find your voice? Share your experiences in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our moments of greatest vulnerability.